Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Juan Camilo Perez, and today I will be talking about Marxism. More importantly, the role of ideology in Marxism. But before I go more in depth, let's just correct a common misconception about Marxism. Most people think that Marxism and communism are the same thing, but this statement is just untrue. Even though they have similarities, doesn't mean that they are equal. The reason for these similarities are because Marxist ideas were integrated into communism, making them different entities. However, communism is the closest thing we have in the real world to Marxism. So just note that when I refer to the USSR/Russia later on, I will not look at it from a communist perspective, but from a Marxist perspective. Before we get into the role of ideology in Marxism, we first have to define what an ideology is. According to Lois Tyson, ideology is a belief system, and all belief systems are products of cultural conditioning. For all sakes and purposes, let's define an ideology as ideas and social norms that a society creates because they believe it is the right way to act. In Marxism, everything from capitalism, religion, Marxism itself, and even science are all just ideologies. Alright, so as an ideology, I think it should be labeled as an ideology. Bam, there you go. Sharpie. Now it's permanent. So now my AP Bio. Wait a minute, hold up. Ah, well, it's a good thing we're not going to school this year. Even though Marxism acknowledges ideologies as just beliefs, they still have ways of categorizing those ideas from productive and desirable to useless and unwanted. This means undesirable ideologies are used to promote regressive political agendas that people pass as the normal way of seeing the world, instead of seeing them as ideologies. According to Lois Tyson, by posing as natural ways of seeing the world, repressive ideologies prevent us from understanding the material/historical conditions in which we live because they refuse to acknowledge that those conditions have any bearing on the way we see the world. Unlike these repressive ideologies, Marxism believes itself to be non-repressive and even acknowledges itself as an ideology, and it is aware that we are only here due to the material/historical circumstances. To a Marxist critic, a perfect example of a repressive ideology is capitalism. As we all know, capitalism is the main enemy of communism. An example of this rivalry is the Cold War. Now, the Cold War was not really a war of, shooting people, but was a war of ideas, being the Marxist ideas of the USSR, see, I told you it would come back, versus the capitalist ideas of America. According to Lois Tyson, in a capitalist economic system, an object's value becomes impersonal. Its value is translated into a monetary equivalent. The word capital means money and determined solely in terms of its money relationship to a monetary market. The question becomes, how many people will buy the object and how much money will they be willing to pay for it? Whether or not people really need the object in question and whether or not it is really worth its assigned price are irrelevant issues.
We interrupt this program to bring you...
Okay, so given that the market controls everything, that means that this half-used hand sanitizer is kind of worth something, but it's worthless. This pen that I've been writing with, worthless. And this Lego Star Wars thing that I just have in my room for some reason, you guessed it, it's worthless.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
To a Marxist critic, capitalism is a false ideology that is repressive and only helps the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, all while the capitalist followers are brainwashed to think it's okay. To a Marxist critic, capitalism is full of false ideas, like the definition of the middle class, how does one even define it? False consciousness, when an idea tries to cover up its own failure. The American dream's falsehood, telling the poor that they are as good as the rich. Classism, making a human value equivalent to their social class, which is defined by their monetary income. Patriotism, keeps the poor fighting the rich man's wars. Religion, the idea to keep the poor satisfied or at least tolerate their life to work. Rugged individualism, which romanticizes the goal of going out on your own and achieving greatness without anybody's help. And consumerism, the idea that one is only as good as their possessions. But the main example I want to use is how the homeless are perceived in America. There are usually two ways that Americans perceive the homeless. The first way is they'll be fine, or the worst, and second one is they like living this way because it's the way they chose. The reason why these are terrible ways of thinking about the homeless is especially because of the homeless trap. The homeless trap is the fact that homeless people can't get a job without an address or an address without a job. Proves that the capitalist mindset of the homeless is severely flawed by the capitalist ideology and shows us how it also proves the idea that while the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Even though the USA won the Cold War against the USSR, and even though the USSR has crumbled into separate countries, the battle between the ideas are still very alive and well today in the former USSR countries like Ukraine, where the effects between these ideologies can still be felt today. Now that we know the two different types of ideologies, we can finally answer the question, what is the role of ideology in Marxism? The role of ideology in Marxism is used to identify the ideology at work in cultural production and how that ideology supports or hinders the power structure in that society. In short, to a Marxist, an ideology is the ideas and social norms in a society that can either support or hinder cultural production. And a false ideology will create a higher class of people that try to cover up those flaws and pass them as natural ways of seeing the world. Hello, everybody. This is the future Camilo, and I just wanted to say thank you for finishing my video, and I hope it helped you with the topic of Marxism. And I just have one thing to say to Mr. Rusich, and that is this is the first time I've edited, okay? Like, I've previously edited a moving slideshow in Mr. Rigney's class, and that was it. This is my first time using Vegas Pro, I think 17. And yeah, I'm not subtitling this because it takes way too much work, trust me. The amount of hours I've put, I'm pretty sure, hold up, I have a timer. About almost 10 hours, basically. I'm just going to put 10 hours on the document of working on this video. So yeah, thanks for that, Mr. Usage.